My parents gave my $92,000 law school fund to my sister. 8 years later they begged for forgiveness. The first time my mother asked me for forgiveness, I was sitting behind a mahogany desk with a case file open in front of me and a judge's order waiting for my signature. Her voice came through my phone so quietly that for a second I thought the call had dropped. "Claire, I know you probably don't want to hear from me." I stared at the rain sliding down the windows of my office. 8 years earlier I had stood in my parents' kitchen holding a folder that contained the savings they had promised would pay for my law degree. It held $92,000. Every dollar had been saved for me since I was a child. Or at least that was what I had believed. Now my mother was asking me to come home. Not for Christmas. Not for a birthday. Not because she missed her daughter. She said my father was sick and my sister had disappeared, and there was something they needed to tell me before it was too late. I should have hung up. Instead I asked one question. "Why now?" There was a long silence. Then she whispered something that made me stop breathing for a moment. "Because we finally found out what you became without us." 8 years earlier I had believed becoming a lawyer was the one thing my family and I agreed on. I was 23 when I graduated, near the top of my class at Northwestern. My mother had framed my acceptance letter to law school and placed it beside the photograph of me wearing a ridiculous oversized graduation cap. My father used to tell everyone that his daughter would someday argue cases in front of the Supreme Court. He said it with such confidence that I began to believe it too. I had spent years working toward that dream. I studied late at night while my younger sister Vanessa watched television downstairs. I worked part-time at a legal aid clinic. I saved every dollar I could. But the biggest piece of my future was the college fund my parents had built for me. They called it my law school fund. My father had started it when I was 14. Every birthday he put a little money into it. Every holiday he added more. My grandmother contributed after she passed away. By the time I graduated college it had grown to $92,000. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it would give me a real chance. Then came the phone call that changed my life. My father asked me to come home on a Sunday afternoon. I thought they were going to celebrate my law school acceptance. Instead I found my mother sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she wasn't drinking from. My father stood near the window. Vanessa sat beside him. Nobody smiled. I remember putting my bag down. What happened? My mother looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at the floor. Then my father said, "Your sister needs the money." I actually laughed because I thought it was a joke. "What money?" My father looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. "Your law school fund." The room seemed to shrink. I stared at him. "My law school fund?" My mother finally spoke. "Vanessa has an opportunity." I looked at my sister. "What opportunity?" She lifted her eyes. "She got into a private design program in California." I waited for the rest. There wasn't one. "So?" My father sighed. "She needs the tuition." I looked from him to my mother. "And?" My mother reached across the table. "We're going to use your fund to help her." For several seconds I couldn't understand the sentence. The words were simple. Their meaning wasn't. "You're using my law school money for Vanessa?" My father rubbed his forehead. "Claire, it's temporary." "Temporary? We'll rebuild it." "When?" He didn't answer. My sister finally said, "You're acting like they're stealing from you." I looked at her. "They are." Her face hardened. "They're our parents. And the money was saved for me." My mother stood up. "Your sister has a chance right now." "So do I." My father's voice became firm. "You can apply again next year." I stared at him. "My acceptance is for this fall." "You're young." That sentence hurt more than I expected. I was young. Apparently young enough to sacrifice. But Vanessa was old enough to deserve everything immediately. I asked my father where the money was. He looked away. That was when I knew. It wasn't still sitting in the account. They had already moved it. I stood there for a long time without saying anything. My mother tried to explain. She said Vanessa had struggled more than I had. She said my sister needed more support. She said I had always been independent. She said I would understand when I had children. I didn't. I couldn't. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that my parents had already made the decision without asking me. My future had been discussed in a room I wasn't invited into. That night I packed one suitcase. My mother cried when I walked toward the door. "Claire, please don't make this bigger than it is." I stopped. I turned around. "You didn't take $92,000 from my dream." Her face changed. "You took the part of me that believed I mattered to you." Then I left. I slept on a friend's couch that night. The next morning I withdrew from law school. I told the admissions office that I had experienced an unexpected financial hardship. I didn't tell them what my family had done. I was too embarrassed. For the next 8 years I carried that secret like a stone. My mother called every few weeks at first, then every few months, then only on holidays. Vanessa moved to California. Her design program became a career. She posted photographs from studios and conferences. She bought a beautiful apartment. She traveled. My parents bragged about her constantly. Whenever relatives asked what I was doing, they gave vague answers. "Claire is figuring things out." Eventually I stopped attending family gatherings. I didn't want pity. I didn't want explanations. Most of all, I didn't want to sit across from the people who had once promised to help me become something, and listen to them celebrate the person they had chosen instead. Then something unexpected happened. A senior attorney named Margaret Ellis noticed me. I was working on a difficult housing case at a nonprofit when she walked into my office and asked why I had written an entire legal argument in the margins of a document. I told her because the document was wrong. She smiled. "Then prove it." I did. She became my mentor. 2 years later, she helped me get into law school through a scholarship program for students with unusual academic records and professional experience. I was 29 when I finally walked into my first law school classroom. I was older than most of the students. I didn't care. I had spent 6 years waiting for that door to open. When I walked through it, I thought about the kitchen table. I thought about my father's voice. I thought about my mother's coffee mug. I thought about $92,000. And then I stopped thinking about them. I built my own life. Law school was difficult. There were nights when I fell asleep over casebooks. There were mornings when I wondered whether I had started too late. But I had learned something during those 6 years. Nobody was coming to rescue me. So I stopped waiting. I graduated with honors. I passed the bar on my first attempt. Margaret offered me a position at her firm. Within 3 years, I had built a reputation for handling complicated civil disputes and financial cases. I wasn't famous. I wasn't wealthy. But I was good. Very good. Then came the call from my mother. "Claire, I know you probably don't want to hear from me." I leaned back in my chair. "Dad is sick." "Yes." "How sick?" She hesitated. "Very." I closed my eyes. I didn't want to feel anything. But I did. He was still my father. I asked what she needed. She started crying. "Your father wants to see you." I almost said no. Then she added something. "Vanessa isn't here." My eyes opened. "What do you mean?" "She left." "Where?" "We don't know." That made no sense. My sister had always been the center of everything. She had been protected, supported, excused, celebrated. How could she simply disappear? My mother said Vanessa had been involved in a business deal that collapsed. There were debts, lawsuits, financial problems. My father had tried to help. Then the family home had become involved. I asked why they were telling me. My mother whispered, "Because the money we took from you wasn't what you thought it was." I stood up. "What does that mean?" She said nothing. "Mom." Her voice broke. "We need you to come home." I didn't answer. She begged. I told her I would think about it. That night I couldn't sleep. The next morning Margaret found me staring at a blank page. "You look like someone just reopened an old case." I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. "What do you want?" I didn't know. That was the truth. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want their money. I didn't want to punish my father for being sick. But I needed to know what had happened. So I drove home. The house looked smaller than I remembered. My mother opened the door. She looked older. Much older. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she hugged me. I stood still. She pulled away. I know. I looked at her. You know what? That I don't have the right. I walked inside. My father was sitting in the living room. He looked thinner. The man who once seemed enormous to me now looked fragile. He tried to stand. I told him not to. He nodded. For several seconds we simply stared at each other. Then he said my name. Claire. I sat across from him. What happened? He looked at my mother. She brought a box from the hallway. She placed it on the table. My father's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were old bank statements, letters, receipts, and one envelope with my name written across it. I recognized my father's handwriting. He pushed it toward me. I should have given this to you 8 years ago. I didn't touch it. What is it? Proof. Proof of what? He looked down. That the $92,000 was never meant to be spent on Vanessa. I stared at him. Then why did you give it to her? My father closed his eyes. Because I believed I could replace it. My mother started crying. My father answered. It was my idea. I turned toward her. She nodded. Vanessa was struggling. She was always struggling. I know. And I wasn't. My mother couldn't answer. My father spoke. We thought you would recover. I laughed quietly. It wasn't funny. You thought I would recover. He nodded. You were always strong. I looked at him. You called my strength permission to hurt me. My father looked down. Then he told me the part one didn't know. The $92,000 had been transferred into an investment account controlled by him. He had used it for Vanessa's education. But that wasn't all. Over the years he had tried to rebuild it. He had borrowed money, sold investments, taken loans. Then Vanessa convinced him to invest in her design company. The business failed. He lost almost everything. The family house had been used as collateral. My mother had signed the documents. When the company collapsed, the bank came after them. My father had spent years hiding the truth because he was convinced Vanessa would eventually recover and repay everything. She never did. Instead, she disappeared after receiving a settlement from another business dispute. I stared at my mother. Did she know? My mother nodded. She knew about the fund. And she knew it was mine? Yes. Something inside me became very quiet. I asked where she was. My mother said they had found an address through an old business contact. She was living in Arizona. I didn't want to see her. But there was one thing I needed to know. Why? Why had they all believed my future mattered less? I called Vanessa. She answered after the 4th ring. Hello. I said her name. Silence. Then she whispered. Claire. I found out. Another silence. I know. That surprised me. You knew they told me? No. Then how did you know? She breathed out slowly. Because I've been waiting for this conversation for 8 years. I sat down. What do you mean? She started crying. I was 21. I was scared. Mom told me the money was family money. Dad said you would be fine. I believed them. You knew it was my law school fund. Yes. I closed my eyes. Why didn't you stop them? She didn't answer. Vanessa. I was selfish. The honesty was painful. I wanted the program. And after, I thought I could make it worth it. She explained that the design company had been her attempt to repay them. But when the business failed, she panicked. She ran. She left my parents to deal with the consequences. Then she said something I didn't expect. I always knew you would make it. I opened my eyes. You had no right to decide that. I know. No. You don't. She started crying harder. You're right. We ended the call without saying goodbye. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, my father asked me to review the documents connected to the house. I told him I wasn't his attorney. He nodded. I know. But. He looked at me. I want you to know everything before you decide whether you forgive us. I took the documents to Margaret. She reviewed them carefully. Then she found something strange. A property transfer. My name appeared on an old document connected to the house. I stared at it. What is this? Margaret adjusted her glasses. It appears your grandfather created a trust. I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of trust? She read the document again. It looks like he placed a partial interest in the property in your name. I couldn't speak. My grandfather had left me something. Something my parents had never mentioned. Margaret kept reading. Then she looked at me. This is important. What? The trust contains a condition. I leaned closer. If your parents used assets connected to your interest without your consent, they could be required to account for the value. I stared at the page. Suddenly the entire story changed. The money. The house. My grandfather's letter. The investment. The hidden trust. My parents hadn't simply made one terrible decision. They had spent years hiding a financial arrangement that could have protected me. I asked Margaret what I should do. She said the first step was documentation. Not confrontation. Not revenge. Documentation. So I collected everything. Bank records. Letters. Property documents. Tax records. Investment statements. Old emails. I built a timeline. 8 years of decisions. 8 years of excuses. 8 years of consequences. And then I discovered something even more disturbing. A portion of my law school fund had never been transferred to Vanessa. It had been moved into an account controlled by my father. The money had later been used to cover a business debt that had nothing to do with her education. My father had lied. My mother had helped him. Vanessa had benefited. And I had been the only person who didn't know. I confronted my father. He didn't deny it. I was trying to keep the family together. You kept the family together by breaking me. He looked at the floor. I know. I handed him the documents. You should have told me. Yes. You should have asked me. Yes. You should have trusted me with the truth. He nodded. I was afraid you would never forgive us. I looked at him. You were right. He started crying. For the first time in my life I saw my father without the authority I had once given him. He wasn't the man who had all the answers. He was simply a flawed man who had made a series of choices and spent years trying to outrun them. I didn't forgive him that day. But I stopped hating him. There is a difference. We worked through the legal process. The trust was properly documented. The property was protected. The remaining financial obligations were separated from my assets. My parents had to sell some investments. They downsized. They accepted responsibility for debts they had hidden. Vanessa returned from Arizona. She didn't ask me for money. That mattered. Instead, she started working again. She sold the business assets she still owned and began repaying what she could. Months passed. Then a year. My father recovered enough to return to work part-time. My mother volunteered at a legal aid organization. She told me she wanted to spend the rest of her life helping people who didn't know how to protect themselves financially. I wasn't sure whether it was guilt or genuine change. Eventually I stopped trying to decide. People prove who they are through what they do repeatedly. Not through apologies. Not through tears. Not through promises. One evening my father came to my office. He brought the old photograph of me wearing my graduation cap. He placed it on my desk. I found this in the attic. I looked at it. You kept it. Your mother kept everything. I smiled faintly. He sat down. I used to tell everyone you would become a great lawyer. You were right. He laughed softly. I was. Then he became serious. I just didn't understand that being proud of you wasn't enough. I looked at him. No. You needed me to act like I was proud of you. I nodded. He wiped his eyes. I failed you. I didn't correct him. Because he had. But then he said something I hadn't expected. I don't want forgiveness because I deserve it. I looked at him. I want forgiveness because I want you to stop carrying what I did. That sentence stayed with me. For years I had believed healing meant proving them wrong, becoming successful, making them regret what they had done. But I realized something. My life had become successful long before they apologized. My degree wasn't revenge. My career wasn't revenge. My office wasn't revenge. My independence wasn't revenge. They were mine. I had built them without permission. And that was the part they could never take. A few months later, I received an invitation to speak at a law school graduation. I stood behind the podium and looked at hundreds of students preparing to begin lives they could barely imagine. I told them that sometimes the person who tells you that your dream is unrealistic is someone who once loved you. Sometimes the person who tells you to wait is someone who has already decided that someone else's future matters more. And sometimes life doesn't give you the resources you were promised. But losing a resource isn't the same as losing your future. I didn't tell them about my family. I didn't tell them about the $92,000. I didn't tell them about the kitchen table. I simply told them that there is a dangerous moment in life when disappointment convinces you that your story is over. It isn't. Sometimes it is only the chapter where you learn who you are without anyone else's approval. After the ceremony, I walked outside. The evening air was cool. Margaret was waiting near the steps. She smiled. "You did well." I looked back at the building. For a long time I thought getting here was the point. And now, I smiled. Now I think it was just proof that they were wrong about me. Margaret shook her head. No, I looked at her. "You're still thinking about them." I laughed. She was right. I looked toward the street. Cars moved through the city. People hurried home. Somewhere my mother was probably cooking dinner. My father was probably sitting beside the window. Vanessa was rebuilding her life. And I was standing there with nothing left to prove. I think, I said slowly. The point is that they don't get to decide what I become anymore. Margaret smiled. Now you're getting it. Years later, I still have the photograph. It sits on a shelf in my office. The corner is bent. The colors have faded. But I keep it there because it reminds me of something I once forgot. The girl in that picture didn't know what was coming. She didn't know her parents would take the money saved for her future. She didn't know she would postpone law school. She didn't know she would spend years wondering whether she was worth the sacrifice. She didn't know she would eventually walk into a courtroom wearing her own name on the door. But she kept going. That girl deserved better. And I finally gave it to her. My parents did ask for forgiveness. Eventually I gave them a version of it. Not because what they did was acceptable. Not because the past disappeared. And not because family automatically earns unlimited chances. I forgave them because I refused to spend the rest of my life allowing one decision they made when I was 23 to control the person I became at 31. The $92,000 changed my life. But not in the way they expected. They thought taking it would delay me. It did. They thought delaying me would weaken me. It didn't. They thought I would always be the daughter standing outside the kitchen door waiting for permission to enter. They were wrong. I built my own door. I found my own key. And when I finally stepped through it, I realized something that no amount of money could have taught me. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the moment you realize your future belongs to you.